that impact our lives and uncover the secret societies and the shadowy elite who construct the reality that we are supposed to believe. So be there Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio A here on Revolution Radio and learn what's really going down. See you there.
Lost a little honey on the lone highway. Left me for another on the lone highway. They killed Dirty John McGee on the lone highway.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Do you feel as if you don't belong? Do you know you were meant for something more? Well, you were. Knowledge of who you are and where you really are from is within your reach. Join Janet Kara Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin as they search for the answers as they open up the Stargate to the cosmos.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. I'm your host, Janet Kara Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter, and you're listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B. And our guest today is Russell Brinegar. We've had Russell on many times. We have a full page on aquarianradio.com, AQUARIAN radio.com, where you can go and read about today's shows and find a lot of pictures. So before I bring on Russell, I want to bring on Sasha. Come over here and say howdy.
Howdy.
Or aloha.
Aloha.
Hi. So, what do you think about what we're going to talk about today?
Well, I think that it's what's really hot on everybody's mind. This the relationship of racism and the pandemic, and how these go together, and what their results are. But it's really striking when I think about how Woodrow Wilson, who had all these wonderful ideas of the world after World War I. He got the plague or whatever was going around there, and he was so sick that not one of his things, except for the League of Nations, got through, and instead there were these reparations, which ultimately led to the rise of Hitler and World War II. And so you can see that part of it was scapegoating on minorities and people making it other, and so I do see parallels, and so I'm really interested in talking about Trump and the trumpets and the rest of the orchestra too.
Right. So, and then Russell, welcome to the show. You were suggesting before we came on that we start with the division in the UFO field between the different perspectives. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. It's a beautiful day today. And picking up a little bit, before we get into that, of what Sasha was saying about the systemic racism that has existed in this country since its inception. Basically, England purged their prisons and their homeless and sent them to the New World because the oligarchs and the aristocrats in England were hoping that they would make money from their efforts and their labors. And they did a lot of bad things and made a lot of people rich over in England until they came over here. And it's always been based on the subjugation of various populations. There was not only black slaves, but there was white slaves, Native American slaves. And this ties into the whole idea of the concept of reparations, because it's a nice intent, but personally, I don't know how they would make the division, because there were so many different slave populations from so many different ethnicities. I don't know how they would do that. I mean, I'm all for the concept of making things right, but I'm not sure how that would play out. And there's almost a denial. People will say, racism doesn't exist in this country anymore because we elected an African-American president 2 times in a row. But I heard somebody the other night make the comparison that Pakistan, subjugates women pretty well, but they had a female leader as well. So the two really don't have anything to do with each other. And as far as the pandemic goes, for whatever reason you want to attribute it to, it has affected people of color more so than the Caucasians. There's probably socioeconomic underpinnings to attribute to that. So there's been a whole lot of stress applied to the population in this country, from the COVID-19 and the shutdown and the stress from that. And there's 40 million unemployed, and 100,000 businesses have been lost forever, small businesses. And you have to ask yourself, well, who benefits from that? Well, Jeff Bezos is set to be a trillionaire, and everybody who's wealthy or has various investments, it just eliminated the competition for them. So the wealthy got wealthier, which happens a lot, and the poor, the working class, and the middle class really took a hit on this, and it's going to be a long time in recovery from that. So you have that stressor of people being out of work and under COVID-19 lockdown, and then this incident where George Floyd, has a white policeman's knee on his neck, and he dies from it, and it just exploded all over the place. It was just too much tension. It overflowed, and pretty much now the country's on fire. So that's where we're at. 2020 is an unusual year.
Yeah, we're only halfway through it. Not quite halfway through it. So that's a lot of information. Perhaps maybe we can go back a little bit more into time and how history repeats itself. And I'm not an expert on this by any means, but so you were addressing this racism, and I guess it goes back that we've always had slaves. To me, my perspective, we're all corporate economic slaves, that the true division is between the rich and the poor, and they've eliminated the middle class. They keep getting richer, and they keep finding ways of monetizing humanity and our labor. Go ahead, Sash. You want to say something?
Well, we also have the problem of a Southern oligarchy in charge of the Senate and the appointment of judges, and having their way. And they might have lost the Civil War, but after U.S. Grant pulled our troops back, it's been re-enslavement in various forms. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay, and then you go from there to the fact that one of the main contributors to the election of President Trump was, of course, the Birtherism lie, where our first African American president was basically carded like a common criminal, and was accused of not even being an American citizen. And finally, Trump came clean with that and actually used the opportunity where he was supposed to come clean about the fact that Obama was in fact born in the United States in Hawaii, but he used it as a self-promotion episode. And then at the end, he goes, "Oh, by the way, President Obama's an American citizen," just kind of as an afterthought. But the election of somebody who promoted the Birtherism lie and hired Steve Bannon as chief of staff, who's pretty much overtly white supremacist, it added to the underlying systemic racism that already existed. And then this incident recently with the policeman just sparked the riots and whatnot. And personally, I don't approve of using violence for political ends. That's kind of the definition of terrorism. Whatever perspective you have, you're supposed to engage in peaceful protests. So, there's a big division between peaceful protests and, breaking windows and hauling out merchandise. But what I've read is that a lot of this is outside provocateurs, of various camps. You've got white supremacist and militia groups that want the black population to look bad, so they're contributing and inciting some of the violence because they just want the whole scene to be chaos. And then you've got the anti-fascist groups, that are doing their thing. And basically a lot of those guys aren't really authentic Antifa, which has been around since World War I and World War II and, fought Hitler. But there's a lot of young people that call themselves that are basically anarchists. And I know from my traveling days that there's groups of people who just travel full time on the road that do not hold jobs, that just go wherever the action is. I mean, they just it's a survival mechanism of them. They call them rubber tramps. And they just go wherever the action is because they know they can get food and gas money and, whatever from the chaos going on, maybe, swipe something. And one thing I recently found was high-end tennis shoes can go for as high as $100,000. I didn't know that. I'd rather have two 1958 Corvette Roadsters if I was going to spend that kind of money rather than a pair of shoes that's going to step in dog poo, I mean, that's crazy.
One thing that shined was that the head of the sheriffs, who was it's supposed to be from Flint, Michigan, when he saw one of his cops hugging one of the protesters, he said, "What are we going to do?" And the black man said, "Walk with us." That's what police do. They walk with people that are using their Second Amendment right to protest peacefully. That's the solution.
I wanted to add something. We'll go back to that walk. What are the solution for all these problems we're talking about? Because we've had, a lot of protests all through the years. So we'll look at the different ones. But I just wanted to add before we get too far down the line. There's a whole story that Trump was born in Scotland, that his mother and father were fighting and they were separated. She was born in Scotland. She's not a natural U.S. citizen, and she flew over to be with her parents. They were split. She found out she was pregnant, and she gave birth in Scotland. So then maybe Trump wasn't even born here. I don't know. There's an article. There's 2 or 3 of them about Trump born. Somebody pointed that out to me, and I'm looking at it and go, wow, there are several articles. Who knows what's true or real, but that was interesting. Okay, back to the protest. So Sasha was a college professor in the 60s. Now, I was too young back then, and you're younger than I am. I don't know if you joined in any protests back in the 60s when we were fighting against the Vietnam War. But Sasha was active in that. And so they were doing the comparisons between 1968 and now. So anyway, do you have any comments on what was different about the protest during the anti-war movement where they had sit-ins? And
we were organized. We didn't let people do violent acts. We acted together. We disciplined ourselves. And then when my friends and Students for Democratic Society, I was faculty advisor, said they were going to do violent stuff, I quit because violence to stop violence is idiotic. When Peter was going to defend Jesus, and Jesus said, "Don't do it, Peter. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword." Violence only begets more violence. What we got to do is reach out and see what it is that these people really need, all of them. And, and the answer to reparations is to give everybody adequate everything, in my opinion.
Back to you, Russell.
Okay, well, I just barely missed Vietnam, so I didn't get in on that. I was a teenager at the time. I did lose a neighbor that was a few years older than me that lived across the street, Billy Martin, and he didn't come back. And I remember my dad pacing the floor for about 3 days over losing him. But I imagine the protests were very different. The ambiance of the protests was very different back in the 60s because there's just a whole lot of systemic anger being expressed right now because of the inequities, fundamental inequities of our society. And I think basically the black community is just tired of white cops killing black people. And I have, black friends that basically say that's the bottom line. It just gets old, one incident here and there. Okay. But you've got, people like Dylan Roof going into black churches and killing a bunch of people. And then Charleston. And then our president says there's fine people on both sides. That's inflammatory. I think a lot of the stuff that Trump says, he really just doesn't understand the historical context of it. Like his most recent faux pas was tweeting out that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Well, he may not be aware of this, but that has a very historical racist context. It's been said before back during the segregation days. So if he wasn't aware of that and was fed that line by somebody, I'm sure that person that fed him that line knew very well what they were doing. So, I mean, he may just be a mouthpiece for other people surrounding him that, feed him stuff that he winds up tweeting. But either way, it's not good. It's very inflammatory to invoke, that type of language. But going into the split in perceptions, that's a really strange thing that's happened in the last 4 years, is that somehow or another, my understanding is Trump's a lifelong atheist, and I have a lot of atheist friends. There's nothing wrong with being atheist. I've got an encyclopedia of gods that has 13,500 entries in it. And in every single one of those cultures, the atheists were right 100% of the time. So, I mean, they have a really good historical basis for their perspective. But for him to all of a sudden pretend, that he's a devout Christian, his little quote, 2 Corinthians, just pretty much showed that he doesn't read the Bible or understand what it is or have any connection to it at all. He's basically in my opinion, using the evangelical community for votes. And the evangelicals, in my opinion, have lost their way because they're into this prosperity theology where if you're a believer in Jesus, then you'll never get sick and you'll never be poor. And by the way, if you send our ministry your money and tithe to our ministry, the windows of heaven will open up on your finances and your health, and you'll never be hurting for anything and you'll never get sick. And I've worked with people in the nursing homes who were of that perspective, and a lot of it's in the charismatic circles. And he wound up having a debilitating illness, and he lost his faith because his whole faith was based on this idea that if he was a believer, he was told by the charismatic preachers that if he believed strongly enough, that no sickness would ever befall him. So they've gotten into some strange theological heresies, basically, because the one thing that I glean from the New Testament scriptures and what Jesus allegedly said in the red letter editions is, you can't serve God and mammon, and it's harder for a rich person to get through the eye of a needle, and you shouldn't even take any thought to your life as far as food and clothing. So it's not his message was not what the prosperity theologians are preaching, and unfortunately that has infiltrated, and there's millions of people that ascribe to this prosperity theology. And one of the biggest proponents of the prosperity theology is Trump's alleged spiritual advisor, Paula White. I mean, you can look at some of the debunking videos on YouTube with her, but, she was trying to talk people into sending in their stimulus checks to her ministry. So there's a lot of racketeering and profiteering involved in the religion business. The religion is big business, and it spills over into the UFO business, because I don't think that you can buy the keys to ascension for $333, and truth is free. The keys to ascension is or escaping this three-dimensional dualistic realm where good and evil are thrown together like they are, is following the ancient wisdom schools, the most recent face of which would be the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament. Whatever you do to the least of these, you've done unto me, because basically we're all disassociated alters in an infinite, unified cosmic mind. And, so all of the teachings of Jesus were very counterproductive, counterintuitive, and pretty radical. For example, don't even be afraid of somebody that's trying to kill your body. Fear instead somebody that's trying to corrupt your soul. So the Hutterites actually is a modern group that I think is pretty close to that, because they're pacifists. They don't engage in the military. When 9/11 happened, they donated their heavy equipment for free and went up there and were involved in cleanup, but they don't participate in any violence, and they live communally, just like a lot of the first century Christians live communally. And it's gotten off track in the last 2,000 years in multiple periods of history. Of course, you've got the Crusades, you've got the witch trials, the Dark Ages, and religion. The Christian religion played a big part in all of that, and it was a very terrifying thing, and some darkest periods of our history. So for the first 3 centuries, Christianity seemed to be doing pretty well as a small group of people that shared their resources, and then the Emperor Constantine in 325 adopted it as the official Roman religion in the Council of Nicaea. So he tossed out some books and accepted some other ones that he liked and brought back in the Torah. So he created this canon that people go today that is incomplete and has gone through several translations. And so we're at where we're at with Christianity. But yeah, there's a big divide in the perception of Trump's persona. And he's kind of like a litmus test or a double-edged sword, because some people have his persona and everything he's all about almost as a demigod, that he is what a person should aspire to. And then you've got people on the other side that would almost cast him as an antichrist figure. If Satan were to have a child, it's in the persona of Donald J. Trump. So you've got this whole spectrum of people, and in particular within the UFO community, it's really strange. What's that?
Let's unpack that a little bit more before we go to the next subject. Come back here, Sasha. You're across the room. Okay, so that was very good. Okay. How do these Jim Jones type cults come about psychologically? We're looking at the manipulation of humanity. You mentioned the Council of Nicaea. They at the Fifth Ecumenical Council, and they started throwing out books that didn't conform to the narrative that they were constructive. They were removing references to reincarnation, and they were doing all kinds of things to get it down to 4 books that agree with each other: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and everything else leading up to that. And now we have the modern era. It seems there's we watched the movie The Family. We did a show on The Family, which is the Netflix special where they have the prayer group, and the prayer group is uniting the world around 2 major issues. The true definition of family being 1 man, 1 woman, so it creates homophobia, and down to certain, what country was that? One of the African.
Uganda.
It's illegal. They can kill you if you're a homosexual. And then the other main issue is women's right, reproductive choice. And so those 2 issues seem to be inflammatory around the world that people can unite against, and it goes back to this biblical stuff, although I don't know if there's things about homosexuals in the Bible, but I don't know. 2 major factions get demonized: women who want to have reproductive choice, and people that are gay, lesbian, bi, trans, they all get demonized. Okay, so here we are, and somehow it's like racism. All these issues are so ingrained deep in the human psyche, and they're able to get Black people to come up against homosexuals. So that's interesting. They may not get them in all 3 issues, but they'll get some people in 1 or 2, and then they unify at this prayer breakfast. So everybody's together, and they say, well, all we need is one thing: Jesus. So they have their little book, which is the book of, I guess, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the ones that talk about Jesus. So and then we see them anointing Trump. And I actually have a picture on Korean radio where everybody's gathered. Look at this picture, honey. Second one down. Everybody's gathered around Trump, and they're all the evangelists, and they're going, Trump is our hero. He's our savior. He's our Jesus. And now we're going to accomplish this. And then there was a very interesting show recently, which I highly recommend, called Mrs. Universe. And it's about, what's her name?
Phyllis Schlafly.
Phyllis Schlafly. So Sasha was a full-on functioning adult when Phyllis Schlafly came in and polarized the world with defeating
Anita Bryant.
Anita Bryant was part of that era. They didn't have her on the show, but they might have her in phase 2. But they polarized the world, and they created this women's group, which was against the ERA, and I guess the ERA never got ratified. Okay, back to one of you two. Do you want to take a talking stick, Sasha?
Okay, it seems that in terms of all these cults and organizations, when they're based on a hierarchic model, that's the surface of the pan-human bonding pattern, that we are helpless and we bond and are dependent on other people. But the other side of it is that they're dependent upon us. The parent needs us to be what it is, and so what's lost in authoritarian systems where there's someone on top and everyone's underneath is the ability to embrace both. And so when you had me look at the raw material, so that it really comes down to you need to be able to embrace both your need to empower yourself and your need to empower your others, your need to give and your need to get. When you do those internally, then you don't dichotomize externally. That's my take on it anyhow.
Well, there are personalities that are prone towards authoritarianism, and I see a correlation between how a person imagines their deity and what type of presidential leader they would want. In other words, if you ascribe to, like, the Old Testament God, who's wrathful, vengeful, petty, jealous, authoritarian, you're going to pick a leader for a country that has those characteristics. So a lot of it has to do with how you imagine a supreme being and what characteristics you would attribute, to a supreme being as to what type of leader you want. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing a lot of looking at what the Catholic Catechism calls the 7 deadly sins, and they're really interesting, and there could be a good subject for conversation. The 7 deadly sins are gluttony, greed, lust, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. And, of course, gluttony is just habitual greed or excess eating. And it's funny because I work with a lot of Filipino therapists, and they're these little tiny females that come over here, and they feel like they're in the land of the giants. And people do have an overeating problem, primarily because the food is crappy. They eat at fast food places that are full of MSG and sugar. And back in the days of Bush, back in the Obama days, let's start with Bush. Bush, the WHO, which I guess Trump has just disassociated us from, but the World Health Organization back in the reign of Bush was about to put out a expose on the sugar industry, saying that it's targeting children intentionally for money. Yes. And it's creating 10-year-olds with diabetes too. It's an epidemic of morbidly obese 10-year-olds with diabetes too. So they were going to put out this expose on the sugar industry, and George Bush, from what I read, said that he would withhold their funding if they put that report out because he thought it would be bad for business. And that seems to be the Republican paradigm, or the conservative paradigm, is anything that's good for money and good for business is good. That's their value system, and anything that interferes with that is evil. And this happened again under the presidency of Obama over 8 years, because Michelle also tried to address the sugar industry and get better food into the grade schools. And when I was a kid, we had cooks, we had cooks back there cooking us really good food back in about 1963, 64. And I remember, having really good meals, but apparently they've contracted with private fast food companies, and now the kids are eating pizzas and fast food and just a bunch of crap that's making them fat and getting diabetes. So Michelle tried her best. She did a really good job of trying to address this. And then you flash to Fox News on Sean Hannity and accused her of creating a nanny state. She's trying to take all the flavor out of food. She's trying to create Big Brother, and all this other stuff. So there's also an educational divide in the country because Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and all those bloviating people that have their own talk shows are high school dropouts, and then you go to the other side of the coin and you get the academic presentation, just like we had that one show we did on the dangerous case of Donald Trump that was produced by Bandy Lee and 37 psychologists. Well, I've shown that online and social media before, and they go, well, those are a bunch of quacks because you're not supposed to diagnose somebody that is not your client. And what they're addressing is what's called the Goldwater Rule in 1964. I guess some psychologists tried to assess Goldwater when he was running. It hurt him politically, so he sued him, and they had the Goldwater Rule, and the APA said that, if you're not a client, that you're not supposed to comment on public figures. But that was overruled 5 years later with something called the Tarasoff ruling, the duty to warn. And now if psychologists feel that somebody who's not their client or who's a public figure is of danger in some way to at least one person, that they can, in fact, give a professional assessment based on, the sum total of human knowledge about psychology and sociology. And they have this knowledge, and they're in a good position to make these types of assessments. But when they do, people lampoon them as quacks, and they're talking out of turn because, this person that they're talking about is not their client. So I think it's legitimate based on the Tarasoff ruling, because what happened there was a psychologist that was working with somebody who did not, because of the client confidentiality, he did not tell the family and the world at large that this person was dangerous, and they wound up killing somebody. So in Trump's case, these 37 psychologists feel that not only does he have a cluster of personality aberrations that under the right stressors could be potentially dangerous and kill a whole lot of people, or possibly all of humanity. So they feel using the Tarasoff ruling, they feel the duty to warn is part of their professional duty to say, hey, this guy has condition of malignant narcissism. He's a pathological liar. He's got this little cluster, egomania, delusions of grandeur, sexual promiscuity. He can't be faithful to the person he committed to be faithful to. And under the right stressors, societal stressors or presidential stressors, he could make some really bad decisions that would wind up harming quite a few people. So personally, I feel that book is quite legitimate, and they're all within their jurisdiction as professional mental health workers to make such an assessment. But that book and everything that they have to say, has quite a bit of attacks, comes with it, because they don't think they have any business assessing anybody. But so there's that. But back to the gluttony thing.
I think it's wise when people when they're interacting with sociopaths to learn enough psychology so they can run away and protect themselves. I think that's a really stupid argument that. We need to identify those people that are potential, terrorists, and they can wipe out all of humanity, potential Hitlers. And so I think we need to be better informed as a society, so we stop, marrying these sociopaths, and especially during lockdown, the children get beat, the women get beaten. Yeah. So
he's already murdered people. He's an accessory before murder for all the stochastic murders that he's created with his goons.
Right, yeah, and then we have 100,000 and counting, and so he is a very dangerous person. And there might be we need to look at this as a society to have qualifiers before people can even run for office. Maybe they take an emotional intelligence test, they have an IQ and an EQ, or they have some kind of basic standards. Because we wouldn't hire these people to run a company. We wouldn't hire these people to even teach our school kids. So why are we hiring them to be president of the United States. So we have to have different standards.
We didn't hire him.
This
The
is
Republicans bought him.
This is not working. The system is not working. Okay. Yeah. So anyway.
Well, that's why I like the historical character of Socrates, because he was anti-democracy because he thought the masses that are voting were morons, and he thought philosophers should run the world. So he inspired several anti-democratic youth movements, and that's why they made him drink hemlock. You know, they did away with him. And that's kind of a funny story because Plato was at the trial, and the judge didn't allow any females in the audience because he didn't want any sobbing. And when they handed out the sentence, I think Plato sobbed, and it made the judge mad because he already eliminated all the females from the trial. But Socrates wound up cheerfully drinking his hemlock and going to his death with a smile on his face. So he was an interesting character. But George Carlin used to talk a lot about the gluttony in this country in particular and the bad food that they eat. And it's understandable that people eat bad food because the bad food is cheap and the good food is really expensive. You know, if Julie and I, my wife and I, have found out, you know, we're trying to eat better, and it's way more expensive to eat better than it is. And there's some really good alternatives to the animal meat market, which has just turned into something horrendous. With the number of people that's on this planet, animals are now treated like widgets in a factory and, you know, cramped together in cages and killed in terrible manners. And we've been going to this Beyond Meat product, which is really good. And if somebody didn't tell me it was a fake hamburger, I wouldn't even know it. So, you know, we eat a lot of that. But yeah, the little Filipino girls that come over here and join us in therapy, they're just flabbergasted at how big people are over here. So that's the gluttony. And then there's greed, which is intense and selfish desire for wealth, power, or food. So this is one of the seven deadly sins, is the pursuit of wealth and power. Now, this has been deified, you know, by the prosperity theologians. It's the opposite of what Christ taught. And the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of power is the exact opposite of what Christianity is supposed to be. So then you get into lust, which is very strong sexual desire, and sloth, which is reluctance to work or make an effort, or laziness. And wrath would be extreme anger. There's a lot of that going around. And then envy, a feeling of discontent or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. And then pride, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own accomplishment. So if you hear somebody bloviating about themselves constantly, they're guilty of this particular thing. Now, every one of those things is things that we're all guilty of. And there is some truth to the idea that what you don't like in other people is what you don't like in yourself. Yes. But the difference is, you know, sure, I'm guilty occasionally of gluttony, greed, lust, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. But I know these things are wrong, and I try to minimize it. And that's very different from somebody that openly and unrepentantly celebrates all seven deadly sins and presents them as virtues. And that's what I see going on with the people that deify Trump, is that all these qualities that we're talking about in the seven deadly sins, these are now the good things that people should aspire to. And so I'm in the camp that, you know, if Satan had a child, he'd be 45. So because of all the things that we're talking about. So when you point your finger at another person and you say, you know, you're a fool, or you're a glutton, or you're a sloth, you're really condemning yourself. So I try to let other people just be the judge on this thing. And that's why I wanted to read through all these things. And these are diametrically opposed to the seven heavenly virtues, which are charity.
Let me just stop for a moment in this and give you the perspective of Jungian psychology, which is it's when you're identified with any particular pole of a dichotomy that you go into inflation on that side and disowning the power of the other side. So that, for example, between pride and humility, if you're humble all the time, that's bullshit. Or if you're, or if you can't feel satisfaction and having done a good job. It's when you have this inflation when you go to one pole, rather than a centered person can do both. For example, let's take giving or taking. If you give all the time, you lose up your life force and you resent the person you give to. But if you allow yourself to receive as well as give, and you can achieve a balance. And when you see that you're out of balance and you realize that gives you the opportunity to make to assess the situation and make a more balanced response. And to the degree that individuals can do that, and the function of existential guilt is for you to evaluate your behavior and perform better. But for me, performing better means being able to be the chooser, being centered between the poles of any one of those 7 dichotomies, including the positive ones that you haven't said yet. Anyway, that's a different perspective, and that's one that I have. It's called centering.
Yeah, it all boils down to what your concept of good and evil is. And the one that I've gone by for quite a while now was quoted by Richard Kinnegar. He was a contactee. He's passed away now, but he wrote a book called The Ultimate Frontier. And he talked about ascension and the progression of the life waves and all kinds of stuff that people are into now, decades ago. But he defined good as any thought or action that's in the eventual best interest of all parties concerned. And I think that's a pretty good definition. And then evil would be the opposite of that. So, the opposite of the 7 deadly sins would be the charity, which voluntary giving of help and or money to those in need. Chastity, which is a state or practice of refraining from extramarital sex. Now, there's, I want to just say this too, there's monogamous marriages and there's polyamorous marriages. And within each one of those, there's a different form of chastity, because in a polyamorous marriage, where it's agreed upon by both partners that they can see other people, the openness and the honesty is a virtue in and of itself. You can actually glean the fruits of the Spirit in this alternative lifestyle because it teaches you compersion, enjoying the pleasure of your partner. And so chastity, I would say, has a lot to do with living up to the commitment that you made with your partner. Be it monogamous or open, either one you can be chaste and honest in your agreements that you have with your partner. And that's my personal opinion. Then there's diligence, careful or persistent work or effort. And the funny thing is about diligence is that it seems to me like that can go for good or evil. There's people who persistently work and put a lot of effort and diligence into doing bad things. So humility, a modest view of one's own importance, kindness, the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate of others. Patience, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset about it. And then temperance, this has to do with abstinence from alcoholic drink. Of course, these were written centuries ago, within the Catholic Catechism. But there's a lot of other sources of Scripture. You got the Nag Hammadi text, the Urantia book, the Oahspe Bible, the canonized Christian Bible, and they all basically say the same thing: is that service to self embodies the 7 deadly sins, service to others embodies the 7 heavenly virtues. So why does any of this matter? Well, if it's just the case that when you live this one little life and you die, you're dead, and consciousness is an epiphenomena of your brain, when your brain dies, your soul dies with it, there's no sense in any of this. You might as well just do what you want. And that's where it comes in to a personal paradigm shift that I had in August of 2009 through a heart attack and a near-death experience, where I actually met a different version of several people that I know, including a transcended version of myself, which sounds really weird if you're not really familiar with that sort of thing. But that's what prompted me into research into the paranormal and research into UFOs, which are intimately connected. There's several very strange phenomena going on this planet that have to do with the UFO phenomena, everything from structured craft that are coming from other planets that may have bases here on Earth, underground, undersea, or inside the Earth, to a plasma-like phenomenon where these exist in the same location century after century, and they're responsible for a lot of what we call the UFO flap. But the luminous phenomena seems to have a psychic connection with certain people, like Dorothy Isaac or Antonio Urzi, people who just get like a sensation that they're around, and they can actually go out and capture them on film, which is really strange. I just watched one by Jaime Maussan with some film captured in Mexico that shows it's almost like a lightning cloud that's ascending from the sky, and then when it gets close to the ground, these little legs sprout out, and the thing starts walking. And it can be caught on infrared film or just accidentally on a regular camera. And these people don't know anything about computers or Photoshop. They're very simple people, and they just happen to catch this on film. But he's got a whole documentary on such a thing. So there's a lot of things in the paranormal realm going on Earth that we don't understand very well. And I'd like to give a little bit of homage to somebody who was actually an arch skeptic in the UFO community named Philip Klass. You remember him? He was an aerospace engineer. But I've been thinking about the death of Stanton Friedman lately, and also the death of John Keel a few years back, both of which were really diligent UFO researchers and died before they actually got the answers that they were actually looking for. And Philip Klass's UFO curse is really funny to me, and I'd like to read it if you don't mind.
Sure. Uh-huh.
It says, this is from Philip Klass, arch UFO skeptic, who is actually right, by the way, that a lot of the UFO phenomena had to do with plasma-like phenomena. But he said, to ufologists who publicly criticize me or who even think unkind thoughts about me in private, I do hereby leave and bequeath the UFO curse. No matter how long you live, you will never know any more about UFOs than you know today. You will lie on your own deathbed. You will be as mystified about UFOs as you are today, and you will remember this curse. I think that's hilarious because it actually does apply to a lot of people who have passed on from this realm. They never got the answers they want. So I try not to allow myself to be like overly obsessed with the subject. I'm really interested in the subject of UFOs. I read a lot about it and I think a lot about it, but you got to enjoy the moment and enjoy the beauty that's all around you and take time to smell the roses and not allow yourself to become obsessed of it. And John Keel used to say that anybody that becomes obsessed or focused on UFOs has probably been processed by the interdimensionals or the extraterrestrials in some fashion or another. And this processing happens on a continual basis, according to Keel, every day, all the time. And a lot of times it leads to a bad end. You know, like Joan of Arc heard voices in her head, you know, and she went to a bad end. Paul on the road to Damascus sees a light, becomes the greatest Christian evangelist, and he winds up, you know, having a horrible death. So there's one case in particular of Philho Prestes in 1946. He was climbing back in the window. His whole family was at a carnival, and he didn't want to go, so he went fishing with a friend. And when he climbed through the window, he saw a luminous orb up in the sky, and it zapped him. And when he got inside his home, the flesh started falling off his bones. He made it to his sister's house, and they watched in horror as his face slid off his skull. So, I mean, it doesn't always result in cosmic illumination. And there's other people that have written about this, you know, the UFO siege and the attack of the saucers and stuff. So it can be either a positive processing where a person changes their life for the better. And there's also the deterioration of personality where somebody starts confabulating and their life spirals out of control in a negative sense. But according to Keel, all of us are being processed in some way or another by intelligences that are beyond us that we don't really understand very well. So it does seem that we're we are proxies in this three-dimensional realm in a higher dimensional cosmic conflict of some sort. The best that we can estimate it is that it's a battle between good and evil, but it may be something way more profound than that our brains can't comprehend. Yeah, in a way, we're like the dogs that are trying to figure out, you know, where their owners go when they drive down the driveway in the morning. You know, where do they disappear to? They don't know because their brains aren't able to process it. And we might be the same way. There's probably a lot of higher intelligences all around us all the time, that look at us like we look at canines or lower animal lives, that their brains just don't have the capacity to comprehend, exactly what's going on. But we have to do the best we can with what we've got to work with. And right now we're involved in this struggle between good and evil. So it's good that you have a concept of your own of what good is and what evil is. And I, for one, would like leaders in the country that practice the 7 heavenly virtues instead of openly celebrating the 7 deadly sins. And that's what I'm looking for. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat or gay or straight or male or female or what race they are, as long as they have compassion for other people and they have a fair level of intelligence, I'm good with
that. Okay, wow. Gosh.
Beautiful. It's in existentialism, evil is disregard for consciousness. Good is what supports consciousness and the substrata that's needed, and then in between is ignorance. And so ignorance is different than evil because it can be altered. Anyways, that's the kind of distinction that Kirstenbaum and other existentialists make.
Yeah, I actually kind of met Phil Klass when I was teaching the Penn State UFO group. I was facilitating it with another person, and we would meet, I think it was every Thursday. He had about 35 to 50 people. It was one of the mid-sized classrooms at Penn State University. But he tracked us down, and he sent a series of very threatening letters, but he never would show up. But he sent a colleague, which was one of the professors at Penn State. And so we were debating with this gentleman. I forget his name. So, yeah, he was he just wanted to be right. He just wanted to tear us down and put holes in any discussion we had. And so, that's what we would do. We would fight off these debunkers, and they haven't stopped coming around. So, okay, back to you, somebody.
Well, we want to see about this modern disclosure thing and Trump's Space Force and all that.
Well, yeah, that's a new series, but let's go down the list of things that, let's see, okay, I'm in the middle of something here. You had a whole list of topics here, and we're down to 3 or 4 minutes before the break. Okay, so let's go back over this. We were going to talk about the split in the UFO field. Say that again, please.
Right. There does seem to be a split right down the middle within the UFO, so-called UFO community, of people that acknowledge that there's the UFO phenomena is real. And some of them are on the Trump side and think that Trump is everything that he should be, and that the Space Force that he's created is a vehicle to disclose the secret space program and the advanced technology that they have to filter it through to all the rest of us, and that it's a good thing. And the people that are the Trump detractors, which I guess I'd be included in that, just think it's something he probably thought of since he was a kid. He thought it'd be really cool, and once he was president, he wanted the Space Force. So he was quoted as saying, UFOs, I don't much believe in them, So, I mean, we've got a UFO skeptic as president. So I don't understand how he's supposed to be the disclosure president when he doesn't even believe that UFOs are real. Now, that leads to an interesting question of how much has he been told? Have the UFO insiders that are on top of the phenomenon briefed him? He doesn't even seem to be interested in going to intelligence briefings. So for somebody who's not interested in any intelligence briefings, nor he thinks he knows everything, I doubt that he's been to a bona fide disclosure briefing about the UFO phenomenon. I don't know if Dr. Greer's talked to him, or if he's been taken aside by a William Casey type figure like Reagan had, and explained that certain incidences that have are alleged to have happened are true, that they had happened. So we don't know what his level of knowledge is. And Grant Cameron, he runs presidentialufo.com. And for years and years and years, he was a nuts and bolts guy trying to figure out what each president knew. It seems like a really tedious and diligent effort on his part. and he's got a lot of information about what various presidents knew. And if you read his latest book, Managing Magic, he gives a section of opinion about the Trump presidency that sort of leans in the way that I'm thinking about it. So I was happy to hear that. But he's recently had a paradigm shift into the consciousness realm himself. So he's into musical aspects of changing psyche and biocentrism and Dr. Bernardo Kastrup and all the consciousness pioneers that are talking right now. So he's undergone a major paradigm shift from nuts and bolts crafter in the air to this is all about consciousness and inner space.
Yeah, and it seems like you said, Trump really isn't really interested in this. So then this Space Force, though, there's a new series out. I think it's on Netflix or Hulu. I think it's Netflix.
Yeah, we watched the first episode the other night. I like Steve Carroll anyway, so, I was entertained by it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it has a lot of depth to it. It's kind of just a farce. But it's really interesting that they're doing Space Force and it's Space Farce. And that Trump has invested so much in it, and I won't spoil it for people who are just tuning into it. I'm watching it. I shake my head at the end of it, and I go, "What?" But anyway, who was it that had Nixon had a real interest in UFO? He took his friend Jackie Gleason, so they say, to see the aliens. Reagan was definitely interested. He was briefed. I've interviewed the person that was with him. He was briefed at Camp David by, I guess it was the head of the CIA at the time.
I read the briefing, yeah.
It was a full-on
William
briefing.
Casey, wasn't it?
And then Linda Moulton Howe published it somewhere, or did a long exposition on what was said, and I've seen the transcripts from from Reagan's briefing. Yeah. So he was definitely in the loop. But okay, so we have this Space Force, and it's obviously being politicized for some advantage. I guess it's inspiring the military to vote for Trump. But there's also the aspect of what are they doing with Elon Musk? There's a secret space program that apparently already is on Mars and the moon and throughout the solar system, and maybe that's why the power elite, they don't really give a damn about us or about the planet, and they don't care if it self-destructs and blows up and the air is unbreathable. They're going to space, and that's going to end back in 5 years.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take freedom!
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain. As free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion. And as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. And this is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction. and Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Jenna Lessin, and I'm here with Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. You're listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B, and our guest is Russell Scott Brinegar. And we're going to come back to the show in just a minute after we instruct you where to go to make your donation this week. So go to revolution.radio, the website, and on the top left side, you can click on the tab and make your one-time donation, or go over to the Patreon button and set up your recurring donation. And we really appreciate whatever you donate to us, because you allow us to stay on air, pay the bills, keep the lights on. Thank you so much from all of us here at Revolution Radio. So, Sasha, what would you like to say? Well, we bring back Russell.
We're looking at Trumpism and government. The way governance is set up on Earth is governments exist to steal your property, your life, and your freedom in various forms. And that's really what we're dealing with here. And the way our whole planet is organized. Trump is just a manifestation of a process that we've really got to examine, and I think that's what we're doing with Russell here.
Right. Yeah, it seems periodically we have some kind of power figure, a dictator, a Hitler, a Napoleon, a Genghis Khan. I put Trump in that category, but it seems to be a function of our society society that we produce these things, and that the racism and classism and sexism and the caste classism, the ultimate racism is the Anunnaki, or those who have the full information, whoever they are, the powers that be. They control the world through keeping the information to themselves, and the power systems like free energy and access to resources that really belong to everybody. And they hoard, and they're greedy. They hoard money, and they create artificial shortages when actually there's more than enough to go around. So where do you want to go this second hour, Russell? We have a whole list of topics.
Right. Well, we left off at the Space Force, and I was thinking during the break that it really is indicative of a deeper mindset, because I know they're wanting to mine the moon, and it's a very capitalistic effort. They talk about asteroids having trillions of dollars worth of platinum and gold, and it's almost like everything in the universe is a resource to exploit. And the way I'm thinking about it is so different, because it's taken millions of years for there to be a delicate balance that's keeping everything the way that it is. And if you start stripping bodies of mass and taking the resources off the planetoids and everything, I mean, who knows how that's going to affect everything. But the Space Force could be just as simple as it's a way to funnel trillions of dollars into the dark money, and into the military-industrial complex. Because like researcher Alana Freeland says in her books, Under an Ionized Sky, The Space Fence Lockdown, there's an effort going for full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. There's several factions. It's not just one. People talk about the New World Order and all that. But even with the New World Order, there's a split in the concept of that, depending on where you lean right or lean left politically, because it seems like the people, my friends that I dearly love, who lean right politically, are afraid of socialism. They're afraid that it's going to be some totalitarian version of socialism with George Soros as president of the world, And then the people like myself who lean left by temperament, thinking of the eventual best interest of everybody on the planet instead of the focus on individual rights. That's basically a difference in paradigm between the two. Is I'm afraid of what we've got now, which is our military installed in 1,000 bases in 153 countries. And, we wonder why other countries think we're the oddball or even hate us, is because we've got a military base jammed in their territory that they probably don't want there. I mean, how would we feel if Peru, stuck a flag in Indiana? I bet all the locals here in Indiana would meet them with AK-47s, And people in this country don't seem to understand, what that would feel like for a foreign power to stick their flag in your country. And ultimately, I'm for the unification of the world. I see us as one race, one people, for a unified planet, Michio Kaku's Type 1 civilization. But when you talk like that, people who tend to lean right politically, get really uncomfortable, because they equate it to the loss of sovereignty, as a nation, and a homogenization of our culture with everybody else, and a loss of identity, a loss of nationalistic identity. And for some reason, the things that I've been through in life personally and everything, I've unraveled a lot of this nationalism. I don't think people should pledge allegiance to flags or worship flags or, sing about bombs bursting in the air. I mean, all of this is alien to me, because I've dug into the underpinnings of it all, and I didn't like what I see. I think nationalism and super patriotism are not good things, where people that lean right by temperament, they have very heartfelt, emotional feelings towards this sense of national sovereignty and the flag and the national anthem and our identity as a country. So I'm thinking of our identity as a world from an astronaut's perspective, because all of the astronauts that go out into outer space, they don't see any borders. They don't see any divisions in people. It's just a planet of creatures that live on it. And then you come down here and you just see the chaos and the division and everything. It's they've all had spiritual awakenings out there in outer space. And I imagine it's very profound to be up in a spacecraft or on the moon and look back and just see a blue ball floating in space. Oh, by the way, Elon Musk's high definition camera put an arrow right through flat eartherism. I can tell you that. I imagine they're all saying that that's fake, but they put a camera on that rocket and you can see very clearly that the Earth is in fact round.
Round, yeah.
So
I wanted to interject about what you just said, to support what you just said, is that, in Star Trek, we have a one world government, and once we're unified, we're no longer, scrambling and divided, the division was originally created by the Anunnaki. They created the subdivisions of religions and regions, politics and countries, so they could pit us one against the other. So we've been divided and conquered since we were created by the Anunnaki, and so this is all artificial. It's just like John Lennon says, imagine there's no countries and no religions too. So I am more of the mindset of the Star Trek in reality. I got involved with Star Trek in 1966 when I was 12 years old, and I worked with Gene Roddenberry and all those people, and we put on the conferences. So I've always been of that mindset. So I think the only way we're going to really, get to the stars is stop having the competition. If we were unified, we would have free energy systems. We move past money, materialism. We would have cures for diseases. The only reason we don't have these free energy systems and the cures for diseases is because it's been monetized and somebody's making a fortune and they're hoarding it and they're keeping resources that belong to all of us, we the people. All the basic needs of humanity needs to be met, like a basic minimum income, but basically a basic minimum need society. If you want to go to the academy in Star Trek, you go. I mean, you get to go because you've done some things and you get qualified and you go. But everybody has a purpose and a meaning, and everybody's life is meaningful. And I've even seen people say that's the racist thing, but it's like, no, everybody, all souls are equal. All avatars are equal. I'm in contact the experiencer. I don't know if you've had any more contact since your near-death experience, but I'm always going to meetings with, people and beings that look totally different than humanity. And if you are prejudiced against somebody just from their color of skin, what are you going to do when they have their whole body structure, their whole face is completely different? I mean, how are you going to treat a mantis, right? How are you going to treat these beings that are totally different than human beings? So anyway, I'm of that mindset, and so I'd like to see us get there somehow, and I know it's totally possible. And then about one more thing, and then back over to you. Socialism. So I was on an island called Johnson Atoll for a year and several months, and we had no money, and we didn't need any money. Everything was provided for us. If we wanted to go golfing, we just went over and signed our name and reserved the time. If we wanted to bowl, if we wanted to, eat food, we went over to the mess hall and we stuffed ourselves. Our housing was free. We wanted for nothing. So that's probably how it is on a lot of these bases. Antarctica, they were in the circle. I could have gone to Antarctica and Greenland and Kwajalein. There are several of them that are these military bases. Go ahead, Sash. You wanted to say something?
Well, I studied with this guy for a while from the University of Chicago named Carl Rogers, and he taught something called empathy training, where people that need to seem to have opposed point of views get together and they hang out a certain amount, and after a while they talk, their facades drop, and they start knowing each other as people. And this came to fruition in a number of places. They actually mediated border wars. Leonard Dube mediated 3 border wars in Africa, where the Soviets and the United States were pitting people against each other. And of course, the governments shut that down. But it was what made the Camp David Accords happen when the head of Israel, Begin, and the head of Egypt said Carter got together, and they got to know each other with these kind of facilitators as 3 grandpas who really liked each other, and they didn't have an agreement. And then finally they started crying together, what kind of world are we going to leave our grandchildren? And so the Egyptian fellow said, look, They'll probably kill me for it, but I'm going to sign. Well, let's have peace between Egypt and Israel. And so we have a methodology. What we need is empathy training, so that the elites regard us as the germ-infested multitudes that are quite expendable. That means they lack empathy, but it's got to go two ways. What is it that they need underneath their ego inflation that we can address in a reasonable manner if we're having empathy that goes two ways is one thing I would ask.
Over to you, Russ.
Well, as far as empathy goes, we don't see a whole lot of it these days. It seemed like even in the younger people, I'm talking to a lot of younger people, and there's this phenomenon called negging, which makes you really strong, where you just immediately insult somebody. And in particular, I notice women from Australia are particularly brutal. And they're just really sort of, I've had 3 of them this month just really be invasive and get on my case about stuff. And I asked a friend of mine who lived in Australia, and she said the men over there are alcoholics by the time they're 30, and they don't treat women very well, so the women have to be really tough. That was her explanation for it. But the women have, I guess, fought back psychologically to where they're almost like, they remind me of a culture of really aggressive bullying men with female parts, and it really hurt my feelings, I mean, they get under my skin big time. Some of the younger people, like I was talking to somebody online who was a Trump-supporting light worker, and a Christian Trump-supporting light worker, and she basically told me I was an old fool that needs to die. I mean, they're real brash about their feelings, which I guess, where somebody stands that way. They don't hide anything. But that's when I get back to the division and perception, with the leader that we currently have, because there's 5D Facebook pages, there's UFO discussion groups, and they're completely dominated right now by arguing over Donald Trump. Even the Rainbow Gathering, which started back in 1972, I went to my first one in 1976. It's basically people who live on the road that get together in a various state forest, and they do drum circles, and you hear chants, "I love you," and it's all about unity and oneness and everything. This year, I read on their Facebook page where they're considering having 2 different gatherings, one for Trump supporters and one for non-Trump supporters. I mean, he's really cut a sword down the middle of human spirituality, and there's people that think he's everything a person should be. He's a strong alpha male. He's a good businessman. He's a successful salesman, and all this, and these are all the characteristics that God wants you to be. And then there's the opposite side of the fence, which I share, where, it's the opposite of that, where I think he, displays horrible characteristics for a leader and doesn't have very much empathy for anybody but himself. And I don't see what he has to do with human spirituality and ascension to 4 or 5 fifth density, that people are striving towards. This whole narrative of Trump versus the deep state, well, I guess it's just depends on who you think the deep state is. I mean, to me, it would be the military industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry, big pharma, basically the super rich people on the planet that make money from human suffering, is the deep state in my book. And it seems like he's in bed with all of them. I mean, he overlooked the murder of a man, Khashoggi, to sell billions of dollars worth of armaments, to Saudi. Some of those weapons are going to kill our own guys, from this country. So, I mean, I don't see how being a global arms dealer, makes us a good thing in the world. And I understand, how other countries, might see us in a negative light, and I want to fix it. I mean, when you voice some of these opinions, people on social media will say, well, why don't you move to China? Why don't you move to another country? It's like, well, if everybody that felt this way moved, what would this country be left with? I mean, we're trying to correct it, and some of the mistakes of our past and some of the current problems that we have, societal problems like systemic racism, like we were talking about before, and mold the country in a more progressive direction and demilitarize the world. I want to get rid of nuclear weapons on this planet and demilitarize the world.
Yes.
And global unification would accomplish that. I mean, what would there be any need for a military unless you want to demonize the aliens and think we need a military to fight off an alien attack, which I don't think is the case. I don't see any need for a military. I mean, I saw a cartoon once about aliens just scratching their head. It's like they've got the weapons pointed at each other, and it's a form of insanity. And I learned that from my stint in the Army, because when you go into the airborne infantry at the age of 17, you get your eyes open to what the military really is. I mean, it's presenting itself as an alternative jobs program for children of poor people who don't have the money to send their kids to college, and a lot of them come back in body bags. And it's a terrible thing in my book. I mean, to hang health insurance and a career and an education and things like that over people's head, if only you'll join this horrid organization, that kills strangers. You're going to be ordered to go kill a stranger in a foreign land that you don't even know. I don't want to do that. So personally, I got out early on a Chapter 5 expeditious discharge, an inability to adjust to military service. And I'm actually kind of proud of that. You'd think I'd be hanging my head, but I'm actually proud because I considered myself a free thinker at the age of 17 to 19. And when I got out of the Army, I hitchhiked for 3 years and lived without money, like Janet, you were talking about before, of just having a period of your time where you don't, I don't even think I touched a whole lot of money for about 3 years. And it's amazing how magical your life becomes when you let it all go like that, because I would be dropped off on a ride, and there'd be like a free meal place 2 blocks from where they dropped me off, or I'd find a $1 bill on the ground, or half of a cigarette, if I wanted some tobacco. And you learn to enjoy sunsets and sunrises and talks in the park with your friends, and a place to sleep that's not on the sidewalk, and it's like it really readjusts your thinking, quite a bit if you try to live without money, like I did for 3 years. So I've had some experiences which have changed my way of thinking to where material acquisition is a pitiful thing to center your life over. If you're always continually unhappy with what you have, and you don't like your house because you want a better house, you want to live in that nicer neighborhood, you don't like your car because you want a better car, you don't like your food because you want better food, you want the 5-star restaurants. It's like life becomes a series of events where you're no longer happy with the moment that you have, and you always think you're going to be happier when X happens in the future, and it never comes. I know people that have retired and then passed on, like within just a couple of months after retirement. They worked all their life thinking that, when I retire, I'll be happy, and then they passed away. So you really have to focus on the moment, realize that the past is gone, the future hasn't happened yet, which isn't really true, but that's our perception. All the physicists are saying it's all happening simultaneously right now. But yes, our cognitive apparatus is such that we're more familiar with the past, and we think the past is a little more real to us than the future is. But Dr. Helmut Schmidt did a lot of work on retroactive causality, where the future has an effect on the present, and the present can have an effect on the past. And they're constantly interacting with one another. And then if you get into Sean Carroll's stuff about the multiverse and how timelines are decohering from one another constantly, where the alternate thing happened, I guess for infinity to be real, every possible thing that you can think of has to happen somewhere, somehow. So
I'm back with something you said about, they were telling you if you don't like it, move to China. From my perception, the USA, America is about diversity and diversity of thought and ideas. And they want to be individuals and free will, and yet they're telling somebody, if you don't think the way I do, it means that you don't like America. You need to go somewhere else. It's like, no, I love my country and I want to improve it, and I'm not just going to be saying yes or yes man, like people that are yes men to Trump are doing more harm than someone saying, that's not the best option for all of us.
It means they don't like you and what you're saying about the person they treasure.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've always liked the beat of a different drum, so whatever. But I don't want to go to China anymore.
That's a thing right now. Everybody thinks they're woke, and it's like there's people from left wing, right wing, various perspectives that all think they're woke, and everyone else is sheeple. That's a cultural aberration that's going on right now, where everybody thinks they've arrived at the final destination, and everybody else is lost. And it's pretty annoying. I hope I never say that to somebody.
They have God. They have found the way and the light and the truth. Hallelujah. And everybody else is stupid. But it's like just another form of prejudice. I'm woke and you're not, and you're stupid, and I know the answer, and I know God, and I know the real God. And my God. Yeah. Sasha, say something. What do you think about this?
I don't care. It doesn't matter what people believe as much as how they behave in a society where we've agreed upon civility. And the problem is hierarchy and people converting power into illegitimate authority. Legitimate authority would come from consensus. And we talk and we meet everybody's needs, or we sequence them, or we coordinate them. And so it seems to me that there are other ways of governance. In anthropology, which is one of my fields, there are a number of what's called acephalous societies, where there's things are discussed. They have a ho'oponopono, a discussion till everybody's perspective is integrated in a way that they can either accept or they will let it go without feeling any harm from it.
Okay, back to you, Russ.
Well, I'm just thinking about what Sasha said about if that's even possible, because the division seems pretty deep. It has to do with some very fundamental ideas that people accept early on in life. And when you do that, that becomes an a priori argument, and it's a basis for a worldview that can wind up being exactly the opposite of the worldview somebody living next door to you has, that accepted a different fundamental early on in life and applied different credences to different ideas along the way. I like what John A. Keel said. I consider myself a student of John Keel. He wrote the Mothman Prophecies, the Eighth Tower, Disneyland of the Gods. There's a whole bunch of works of his out there, and he was very insightful. But he said that belief is the enemy. And I didn't know what he meant at first, but I think I do, because if you ascribe to a dogma or a doctrine that's rock solid, the truth could look you right in the face and you wouldn't recognize it at that point. And you've got to get to the point where you're willing to listen to somebody say something that, maybe rubs you the wrong way, or you don't think is real or is impossible, and just file it away. And I've tried to do that, with my Trump supporting friends. I've got one friend in Florida who's a Trump supporter, but our relationship goes back to 1962. And we have a long memory of prior to the Trump era that salvaged our friendship. And, I try to be friends with people that have diverse view, but I find that it's so strong in some cases. I've got somebody here in town that refers to me as your kind. I'm glad there's not more of your kind in the world. It's like, well, I got news for you. There's at least 65 million, because that's how many people voted for Hillary. It's not just me. And, I like to have academic citations, behind my opinions, and not just somebody bloviating on an op-ed channel. And you're met with that. If you give book citations or academic citations, you're just a bookworm or a know-it-all. There's an anti-intellectual movement going on, too. That's another part of our culture. And Russia went through with that a few decades ago. They gathered up poets and intellectuals and academics and executed them. So I hope it doesn't get that far in our country, but there is an anti-intellectual movement, and it's coming from the GOP. And there are conservative intellectuals like Stuart Stevens, who wrote It Was All a Lie, how the GOP became Donald Trump, and Stephen Schmidt and Joe Scarborough and Michael Steele. And there's some very smart, intelligent, heck, even Ben Shapiro, who's the conservative debate champion, said, quote, Trump is a buffoon. So when you present conservative authors that have taken the time to write a book, conservative George Will, is not liking what he sees with the direction that the Republican Party has gone under Trump. So, I mean, it's not just the libtards like me, it's the conservatives, the traditional conservatives that don't like what the party has become. And when you consider that there's actual like spiritual retreats and spiritual Facebook pages and spiritual organizations, 5D ascension groups and all that are pro-Trumper and think he's just fine and dandy, it's just really mind-blowing.
Wow. Well, they can hate everything. There's always somebody that has some way to demonize and make something wrong, like being a nerd is.
If you grew up in California like I did, where your classmates are Chicano people, you can't take this bullshit that they're going to send people back to Mexico that have lived with us our whole lives. It's not riots that we have. It's a rebellion. Some of the people are rebelling against the system of murdering black people.
Yeah. So, what to do? How do we do this?
Well, it's a powder keg. It's a powder keg that went off. They were already stressed out, like we were talking about before, with the COVID-19, the shutdown, the quarantine, the isolation. It disproportionately affected people of color. And then, you see a video of a white police officers, killing somebody with his knee on their neck. And how much is somebody supposed to take? I don't advocate the looting and the violence, but it's understandable on some level. Like you said, Dr. Lessin, it's a rebellion. And it's only human, just to explode at some point.
I saw a video of this man that was mentally ill. And they went on his neck, and he said, "You're going to kill me. Please don't kill me." Same thing. Put the knee down, and he was dead. And then they were laughing. He said, I think we killed him.
Wow.
Some sick people. I don't know.
Yeah, social media has contributed to that. I've taken the time to watch videos of people cutting the ears off of puppies, to be viral videoed, and skinning puppies alive or pulling cats apart. The young people are doing this on Instagram and stuff, and for instant infamy, I guess. But it's a sick faction that social media has produced. Everybody's addicted to likes and addicted to viral videos, and they'll do anything. Literally anything. I'm surprised they haven't made snuff films, people killing people on live Facebook. That's next, I guess. I mean, it's just crazy out there. So,
when you see the cops knee on somebody and they're dead, they snuff them out. They just snuff. We're all watching somebody leave their body, take their final breath. And that's really disgusting that even.
But what's really very powerful to
happens
me
or gets filmed.
Was a thing in Central Park where this this guy said, "Please take, would you put a leash on your dog? I would like to walk past." And she said, she said, "No, I won't. And I'm going to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call 911 and say that you're a black guy and you're threatening me." And he just recorded her saying that before she did it. But it was the assumption that she had, because she's a white woman, that the police would assume that this black man should be apprehended and perhaps harmed. And that's the assumption of somebody that lives in New York, of all places, where a lot of us that hang out in New York were way past that stuff.
Well, this was discussed in the book that we had a show on, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. The psychologists refer to it as the Trump effect, and it's affecting grade schoolers, where just the name Trump in your face is being used to bully non-white school children, by white kids who probably have Trumper parents and MAGA parents. They wear the MAGA hat and whatever. And they're just going up to non-white kids and going, "Trump, MFer," and that's all they need to say. And that's terrible. What kind of a leader would do such a thing, where his very presence is producing horrid behaviors in young people? And this is going to be with us for a long time. Ted Koppel had an interview recently, and he said that if the Democratic candidate is somehow able to beat Trump. He doesn't think he's going to leave office peacefully. And he's already laying the groundwork to call it a rigged election, and it's all a lie. And his base is going to demand that he stay on longer and, maybe do a third term or whatever. So if the Democrat wins in 2020, we're probably going to hear from a very noisy Trump base. You've got the militia groups activated and the people that think that this is all a coup, that the Democrats are all part of the deep state that's trying to take Trump down. He's such a good and saintly man, and we're just trying to take a good man down, And
it might never even get to an It may never get to an election if he does a committee comitas, where an old law where the federal troops can move into this and take over anywhere. And it hasn't been done for a long time, but there are avenues that if he thinks he's going to lose, or if he doesn't even, because of the unrest and the rebellion that's going on, he may seize the ball and just declare martial law, do this committee comitas thing or whatever it's called. And this is it. This is a time that it's important to be able to protest and protest peacefully, and to organize your protesters so that you stop incendiaries and people that would, Kent State had peaceful protest, and then a provocateur shot off and start the nervous National Guard shooting innocent citizens. That's what's happening now in the streets.
Yeah, well, I've got a friend that texted me this morning. He's a retired state trooper, and he sent me a text, and he said, we're headed straight towards authoritarianism. He said, there's no more question about it, whether we're headed towards an authoritarian regime. The question is what we're going to do about it.
Yes.
So let's look at that. What can be done?
Stop participating in institutions that rip everybody off.
Exercise your freedom of speech while you still have it. And it's a good thing that we can do shows like this and we don't have to worry about a knock on the door. So, I mean, we've got the freedom of speech still, so far anyway. That may change in the future. And, it's the censorship is starting on social media. And, I've got mixed feelings about that. Part of me thinks that they should block things like from hate groups and all that. And then it's another part, I'm conflicted. It's like another part of me just thinks it should be a platform. It changes their legal status too, because right now Facebook and Twitter and all that, they're a platform and they're supposed to allow anything and everything. But if they start censoring it, they become a publisher that's engaging in censorship, and they're opening up themselves to lawsuits. So their legal status changes from platform to publisher when they do that. And I don't think they're going to like what that is. So at some point they may go back to just being a platform and just allow anything and everything. But I have to admit some level of satisfaction when Twitter flagged a couple of Trump's tweets, and this may not be true. It's like censorship is great if you believe, if it's, conforms to what you already believe. It's the censorship of what you do believe is right, that bothers people. So.
Well, there's a thing called stochastic terrorism that we need to look at.
Right.
And it's a psychological effect. So when somebody posts something, like a power figure, like the president, says, it'd be nice if somebody would do something, take them out, or I can't think of the quotes, but.
Yeah, this Beckett guy, he's a problem to your king, and the noblemen hear it and they go kill him.
Right. So they act out what you're saying because you're a power figure. You're very influential. What you say carries weight, and they take care of it. And so we have these assassins, and a lot of that happened early on. We started to demonize Muslims, and next thing you know, and it's not even just America. Over New Zealand, they get their mosque, their Muslim mosque got 60-some people killed, right? So this is called stochastic terrorism. So how do we address that? when it's in the media, these people are somehow mesmerized and mind controlled, and these things like MAGA, the hat, that is a code word for Trump, for racism, for sexism. These things, and they talk about this in the the Manchurian candidates and in the secret space program. They take a symbol when that becomes your key word, and you act out things. So we have a whole
like Jesus
population
was the symbol, yeah.
is being mind controlled and manipulated. They act out things, and people get killed. So I don't have the answer. I have a lot of questions, but I'm not sure how to do this. But right now we have a planet that's really mean. There's a lot of mean people. You just said about 20 things that people are saying to you that's really mean. And, we may have thought it before, but this generation says it. Like they lack any kind of filters, and there's no boundaries, and they're entitled. And they'll just say, oh, here's the new plague, COVID-19. Well, goodbye, boomers. It's a big boomer remover. And they're so, sociopathic and uncaring and lack empathy. And so, they start thinking about it when it starts killing children. Maybe that they just go, well, I'm going to die from something. It's like suicide. It's like suicide bombers. Let's go to the beach over Memorial Day and catch it, and we won't die, but Mom might die or Grandma might die. What is it with our society that it's so suicidal and murderous? Is that because of 50, 60 years of being exposed to television and they're desensitized to what it's like to be a human being?
Well, I know kids that are 8 or 9 years old that the only thing they've ever done is stare at a screen and kill people on video games.
That's
so
it.
It's understandable. And then, you add in a leader for the last 4 years that openly celebrates the 7 deadly sins, and you've got an effect, the Trump effect, from kids that are in their formative years, who are listening to conversations by their parents this last 4 years. And if that's the leader of the country and that's the way he is, that's the way I should be. So you've got 4 years of developmental instruction, coming from the highest office in the land to young people, 6 to 10 years old, let's say, or maybe even younger, who are going to adopt these characteristics. So I think this whole thing's going to be with us for quite some time, even after Trump's gone. And it's going to take a lot of remedial education. You mentioned stochastic terrorism, and people look at you like the deer in the headlights. They don't even know what it is. Charles Manson was a stochastic terrorist. He never killed anybody himself, but he incited others to do his bidding. And when you demonize a group of people, like you demonize the Democrats, and then you got a pipe bomber sending, pipe bombs to the Democrats, there's people with a loose screw out there. And as president of the United States, you've got to be very careful with the words that you use, because you're going to trigger these loose screws, and they're going to do bad things and hurt or kill people. And an adult should know this. And I keep going back to the guy that contributed to The Art of the Deal, as his ghostwriter. He said Trump has the attention span of a 10-year-old, and he regrets his part in it because he thinks he might have had a part of making him famous enough to get elected president. But he has deep regrets about it. So he's going around on a lecture tour telling people how deeply he regrets his part in it.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
So,
I should grab the definition of stochastic terrorism and put it on the page. Yeah, people don't understand what that is, but that's what's going on.
It's inciting to murder. In simple English.
Yeah, inciting others to kill. And
yeah. And if you're a solipsist and you think everybody else is unreal, that you're the only person in the universe that's real and everything's about you, you won't care about any of that stuff, and you'll use the office to do what you always dreamed about, being able to say and do whatever the hell you want with impunity and be damned for the consequences, So that's what we've got.
When I think of Trump and Pence displaying themselves maskless, close to each other and playing golf and hitting hands with people, I think, you know what, they're going to both die of the virus, and Nancy Pelosi will be president until the election.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing about a person's concept of alpha males and the female aspect of our population that adulates Trump's character. Because to me, from my perspective, he represents everything I've ever heard women complain about in men. They've always told me they don't like the cheating, they don't like the gaslighting, the lying. These are all bad things. We wish we could find a good man. And what do? They elect a guy that has all the characteristics, and they worship the guy for it. So go figure. I mean, it's a puzzle to me. It's a mystery to me why females would adulate somebody that, trades women in for a new model every 2 or 3 years like they're a used car.
That's what their dads did.
Oh, is that what it is?
Is that what it is?
It's your daddy, so they vote for him.
But looking at the bigger picture of what ascension actually is, there seems to be a split in that, because part of the Christian community looks at the figurehead of Jesus as a savior figure, a cosmic sugar daddy. They can live any way they want, and if they just flap their lips that they believe in Jesus, they'll die and go to an eternity in heaven. And then there's other people, more of a Gnostic bent, that have read deeper than just the New Testament, that recognize the keys to ascension, the behavioral keys, which is service to others versus service to self, which we've broken down in the 7 heavenly virtues and the 7 deadly sins in this conversation. These are the types of things that you should be engaged in if you want to ascend from this realm. And this is where the raw material, the Law of One, for listeners that aren't familiar with this body of work, it was channeled by a woman named Carla Ruckert in 1981. And it's 5 or 6 volumes, and it's a really nice body of material. But according to the raw material, the third dimension is the dualistic room. It's where the higher dimensionals, both positive and negative, gain proxy allies. And, we're here to make a choice. And the fourth density, according to the raw material, is the last density that people actively engage in this cosmic conflict between good and evil. And then 5th, 6th, and 7th, you use proxies, And it was interesting because the big contact group from 1956 to 1967 in Italy, known as the Friendship Group, the positives that they were interacting with shared their underground base with the CTRs, which are the higher density negative creatures. So they no longer engage one-on-one, with physical conflict at all. And so I'd like to get into that type of realm, that's more polarized. And I guess we're here to make a choice. The negative path has an appeal and has a population that appeals to too. It's about conquest and domination of others, domination of the physical world. And there's apparently a group of negative higher dimensionals, what we would call negative higher dimensionals, who are engaged in that pursuit of conquering the universe. And this is where the book that I wrote, Overlords of the Singularity, comes into play, because I do think that there's some underlying reality to the flying saucer crashes that are feeding us technology, trying to get us to this culmination that they refer to as the singularity. And this negative Orion group is using this event for their own purposes. There's a researcher named Robert Stanley that I listen to a lot, and he's not a big fan of the singularity. He thinks that the Orion group is going to merge a part of humanity with their alien hive mind and return to Orion and usurp the Queen of Heaven there. He's got a whole cosmology worked out in his head about it. So there's definitely something with the negative groups having to do with the singularity and transhumanism, but I personally don't want to be afraid of the singularity, and a lot of it has to do with who makes the first artificial general intelligence, human-level intelligence first. Right now, there's 56 companies working on it, and you've got people like Steve Omohundro and Eliezer Yudkowsky that are working on the correct cognitive architecture to go into the first seed AI, which will convert itself to artificial superintelligence. So it really just depends on who gets there first, who achieves a human-level artificial intelligence first. And this goes back to what you were saying, Janet, about universal basic income, because as automation and artificial intelligence takes over the labor force on Earth, we got to make a living somehow. So we're going to have to change paradigm from he who dies with the most toys wins to material. We're only here for a temporary period of time. It's about celebration of life and service to others, making friendships, developing relationships, and philosophy, art, all the positive things in this life, and convert to looking at material goods as strictly utilitarian, just like they do on Star Trek. When we get the replicators and the molecular reorganizers and everything that has a part to do with the singularity, material goods will be devalued completely because they can be produced freely, and people will convert from the capitalistic paradigm of seeking to be a hoarder, basically, and acquire as much material goods as you can before you die, to looking at material goods as utilitarian, and that everyone on Earth is equal and has equal access to the Earth's resources. But like I said, when I start talking like that, people accuse me of being a communist. I even have a Chinese outfit and a gong. I made a little video and I leave it as a comment. It's like, whatever.
Well, why do you let them disempower you by their accusations? It's like, so what?
No, you just. What I say to people is I have studied Karl Marx, and I think there's a huge amount of humanism, and that he was concerned with the welfare of people, and I'm not. I think there's some very fine ideas in Marxism. That's my take.
There's good ideas in everything. It doesn't mean you are that. We're all a combination of these different governance systems. We have socialism. We have Social Security. I'm surviving on Social Security.
The welfare state we had.
So the Trump's trying to take it away. What's he want us all to do? Just die? I mean, if we take away Social Security, you're not going to have any way to live. So this guy's not good for anybody.
Well, I know people. I know people that are working class who want Social Security to go away because they don't believe in it. It's a big Ponzi scheme that this generation shouldn't pay for the older generation, and that people should work until they die or they're not worth anything. I mean, that's their mindset, that you're worth.
Why should they valued as it's a total slave system? Just look at that. The only value we have is that we work.
It's terrible.
These whole things they're recommending for the next level of stimulus are based on your work value. And so, so I'm not working anymore. I'm supposed to drop dead or dig a hole and crawl in it and have somebody shovel dirt over me. No, my life is my life. I have value and purpose and meaning, and I'm here to complete it on my own terms and not to rush to death to satisfy your GDP. It's insane. I don't understand why people buy into this bullshit. Do you realize you're talking about your mother? Do you realize you're talking about yourself in 10, 20 years? It's Logan's Run. Remember Logan's Run? When you hit 30, you were supposed to go turn yourself in, and they turned you into dog meat. These are concepts that we've had in science fiction for years, and they're acting like that's the way it's supposed to be. Our only value is when we're able to march off to war or work in a Walmart. And after that, goodbye.
Well, my local Walmart has eliminated the Walmart greeter. They've got a mechanical gate now that counts everybody as they walk in like cattle. So there's another job that's been automated. It's right next to the self-checkout.
They let us all have jobs, but I think COVID is a blessing in disguise. We have to reorganize our whole society and get past this bull crap that we've been promoting for years. Like that's the
Well, the online businesses was the place to be during COVID. I mean, Jeff Bezos is set to be a trillionaire. And people started shopping a lot more online. So the online businesses are sailing. They just got a huge influx of cash. And then, of course, the stimulus, everybody got thrown a $1,200 breadstick, while the corporations and the cruise lines and the airlines, they got billions. So.
Hey, take Bezos' money and what was the other guy who was running for president? That guy could have given everybody $1 million
Right.
that ran for president. He spent more, per person. I mean, if Bezos wanted to make more money, he'd hand money back so they would just spend it again. Everything that we get, the poor and the middle class, is going to get spent. We are not hoarding it. We don't have money to put in the savings. We need to pay the electric, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, buy food. So it's really logical to give it back to us, and we'll just go give it back to you, but we'll get a product or service. It keeps the society going. Anyway, we're running out of time. We got about 2 minutes. Final word, Sasha.
We're all stakeholders, and shareholders are not as important as stakeholders in the way things are governed. That's my last thing.
Final words to you, Russ.
My last thought would be, despite the fact that the country's on fire and it seems like the world's full of negativity and chaos, just focus on your own soul work. There's a bigger picture going on. We live in a multiverse. There's higher dimensions to ascend to, and a lot of it has to do with your vibrational frequency, and that's generated by the behaviors that you choose to engage in and the behaviors that you choose to abstain in. So heal any broken relationships that you have. That was important when I had my near-death experience. That's the biggest thing on my mind going to the hospital, is relationships that I'd had that were negative, that it was my fault. So I worked very hard to fix those things. And that's my suggestion, is to heal your relationships and find your own peace.
Oh. Your name of your book is again, Russ?
It's Overlords of the Singularity, the manipulation of humankind by hidden UFO intelligences and the quest for transcendence. It's on Amazon and Kindle that'll read it to you, or there's a 545-page printed version that you can chew on for a while.
So this is a really important book. It's a compendium of everything you wanted to know up to the time that Russell wrote it.
Great. And that was, are you going to do a sequel? Are you planning on any other books?
Yes, I was asked to do a chapter by the Free Organization, and I've got a substantial volume of material. I'm waiting to see if they actually use it. If they actually use it, I'll go a different direction. But yeah, I feel one brewing, and it's not going to be a scholarly work where the tedium of citations is at the end. It's just going to be kind of a free-flowing thing about the bigger picture here on Earth.
Look forward to it.
Okay, Thomas, is the music going to come at 56 or is it later?
It's coming. It should be coming any second.
Any second. Okay, this used to be 56. All right. So when you get your, I'd say go for another book. Doesn't matter if Free uses your chapter or not. Just do it, Russ.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of things I'll do differently next time.
Okay, there. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Ravens.